Welcome to the Plenary Section 3. What's on in research in hospitality and tourism today? Now, may I introduce the 4 speakers today. Professor Rob Law. Professor Bob McKercher. Professor Chris Roberts. Professor Haiyan Song. And may I invite Professor Ki-Joon back. He is the section chair in this section.
Good. Right, welcome to the plenary session number 3 on research. I know we have a theme in the name of innovation, research, and education. So this session is specifically geared towards research. So we have 4 distinguished panelists whom I'd like to briefly introduce one by one before we actually talk on the discussion session. First, from my far right, Professor Rob Law. He's a professor at this School of Hotel and Tourism Management at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. He's the honorary advisor for Information Technology Division of Beijing Tourism Industry Association, and also he's a managing editor of Asia Pacific Journal of Tourism Research. Perfect. Yes. So Professor Rob Law has worked in Canada and Hong Kong in both industry and academia. Professor Law is an active researcher. He has published multiple research on the tourism side. And Professor Law serves as different roles for many research journals and is a chair committee member of more than 140 international conferences. And next, I'd like to introduce Professor Bob McKercher. He's also a professor here in this school, and also he's the president of International Academy for the study of tourism. Professor Bob McKercher has been a tourism academic since 1990. He has a wide-ranging research interest and has published over 250 scholarly papers and research reports on a variety of subject areas in tourism side. He is a member of the International Academy for the Study of Tourism, and he's a fellow of the Council for Australian University Tourism and Hospitality Education. To the left of Professor Bob McKercher, Professor Haiyan Song, who is also a professor here and also Associate Dean of Research and Chair Professor. He's also Editor-in-Chief from Journal of China Tourism Research. Professor Song has a strong background in economics. His main research area is tourism economics, with a particular focus on tourism demand and modeling as well as forecasting. Professor Song was honored by the International Council on Hotel, Restaurant, and Institutional Education, which we call ICRE, with the John Wiley & Sons Lifetime Research Achievement Award in 2010, and received the Michael Olson Research Achievement Award from the University of Delaware in 2014. Professor Chris Roberts, right next to me. He's a professor and director of graduate programs in the School of Hospitality Leadership at DePaul University in Chicago, USA. He's also editor-in-chief for the Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Research. And Professor Robert has great hotel experience in both operations and reservation centers with the Holiday Inns, and then has a lot of experience in travel industry as well. Professor Robert has authored more than 50 publications in journals and industry publications, co-authored several books, and has given more than numerous presentations around the world. His research is centered upon strategic decision-making, leadership, and executive teams in the lodging industry. So we have this 4 fine panelists, and I'm again, my name is Ki-Joon. I'm the Associate Dean of Graduate Program and Research, and Eric Hilton, Chair Professor at Hilton College, University of Houston. And we are actually going to talk about several different thematic issues in the research. So how we are going to orchestrate this session is a little bit different. We'll show each thematic slide to you, and then we'll discuss about those areas. So first slide that we are going to project will be on the desk rejections. There are over 335 hospitality and tourism academic journals, and there are a lot of people are submitting the papers. So, and then each journal has actually experiencing high desk rejection or increasing number of rejection rates. But we need to focus on the acceptance rate. How can we successfully publish our papers that we spend years of our time, and then how can we enhance the success rate? That's what we wanted to discuss today as a first thematic, and then wanted to hear from each individual faculty member. So, Dr. Roberts, if you don't mind, would you like to lead the discussion on this topic, please?
Sure, be happy to do that. You know, a big part of the way the academic publishing world works is we count on the volunteer time from you, the other academics who are researchers. And that's a precious resource. JHTR, of which I edit, gets about 600 submissions a year. And if each article had 3 reviewers, that's 1,800 reviews. That's a lot to ask from our academy, and we're just one of those 300 plus journals. So as editor-in-chief, I've got to look at that precious resource of reviewer time with respect. So when papers first come in, we have to do a vetting, a review of them before we bother sending them out to the reviewers. We want our reviewers to have something that's ready for them to look at. So the issues you see on the slide are what we pay attention to. The journals each have their own mission and scope. They put out public submission guidelines. They tell you what they're about. For example, JHTR is focused on advancing theory in hospitality and tourism. So if your paper comes in and doesn't address that mission, right off the bat, it's not a right fit, a right place for the article. We certainly look at some of the mechanics, the length of the paper. As academics, we all can go on and on and on about a topic. But we put out those guidelines to encourage you to be crisp in your writing, to prepare a research study report in a way that's going to be digestible by your readers. So if you send us something that's 12,000, 14,000 words, we're going to send it back because it's simply too long. So paying attention to the format, the APA style, the length of the paper, to make sure the grammar is correct. These are all essentials that we review in the desk review step. And so that you would understand what I'm talking about, when that paper comes in before reviewers see it is when we conduct what we call this desk review. I have an assistant that goes through the mechanics. She puts your paper into Microsoft Word, and she has the grammar check and spell check turned on. And if she sees lots of red underlines and green underlines showing problems other than individual names, we know it's not grammatically correct and we have to send it back. She'll look at the length, she'll look again at the APA formatting, just real basics. So if you want to get through that first hurdle, pay attention to the guidelines, pay attention to the formatting, prepare your work in a way that it's ready for the reviewers. At JHTR, again with the large volume we get, we reject more than half the articles in the desk review process because they simply don't meet these basic standards. So we want to see your research. As Dr. Beck said, you work very hard on preparing that paper. We value that. But make sure these basics are in place so that our reviewers get something ready for them to look at.
Thank you. Professor Song?
Yeah, still on this desk rejection issue, actually all the points already indicate very clearly those are the things that the editors will desk reject the papers. For our journal, Journal China Tourism Research, although we have a relatively smaller number of submissions compared with other journals, we have about 100, 120 submissions per year. We accept about 30% of the papers submitted, but still we require quite a lot of reviewers to review those submissions. So one of the things myself and also the managing editor, Dr. Hong Geng Xiao, will be doing is first to look at all these submissions to see whether there's any ground for a desk rejection so that we do not have to send out to the reviewers because the reviewers are very busy themselves as well. For most of the things I will do the desk rejection is mainly related to the presentation because we want to give a chance to the authors to be evaluated by their peers. So for me, actually, the improper presentation, including grammatical mistakes and errors, are the things that we desk reject the paper. And also, personally, I'm a quantitative research researcher, and I would pay a particular attention to the research methodology. If you just using a research methodology repeatedly analyze a different data set in a different region or area without new methodology contribution or even theoretical contribution, then that is clear desk rejection. But I'm sure every editors will have their own ways of evaluating these papers. For me, presentation and research methodology are the two things I'm looking at.
Okay, thank you. Dr. McKercher?
Thank you. Now, there are a number of issues in publishing, and one is there are some topics that are done. There have been over 140 papers published on the social impacts of tourism. The 141st is never going to get published in a top-tier journal. So don't waste your time targeting the wrong journal for the type of research. There have been almost 100 papers done on loyalty. And again, why aim for a top-tier journal if it's going to be a derivative piece of research? When you look at papers that have been submitted and people say, well, you know, this is another paper on social impacts of tourism, here is where our novelty lies. We're conducting it in East Bumport, New York, instead of West Bumport, New York. That's where the novelty lies. That's not novel. The paper may actually be publishable, but it's not going to be publishable in a top-tier journal. And I'd like to make just two other comments. Following up on what Professor Song said, you cannot hide a bad method. So don't try to hide a bad method. If the method is so fundamentally flawed that the research cannot be conducted, the paper's got no chance of being accepted. Don't try to hide. I had one person say, here's a survey of 175,000 people. And as you read through the paper, there were 175,000 people who went to an event. As you read through, the person spoke to 25 people. So it really wasn't a survey of 175,000 people. And the other thing is the all-important so what question. Again, good descriptive studies are publishable in probably second and third tier journals. If you're going to aim for the top tier journal, there has to be a so what statement. What are the broader implications of the studies? And one of the keys that I look for in so what studies, if somebody says tourism planners should, the first reaction is name one tourism planner, because there are very few of them. And if somebody's saying tourism planners should, that really means they don't understand either tourism or they don't understand the broader implications of the paper. So think through what it means, target the right journal, And if it's a derivative study, don't waste your time aiming at a high-tier journal. Aim it at a second or third-tier journal that is more likely to accept these types of papers.
I will focus on the desk rejection. APJTR has a quite high desk rejection rate. It's more than 50%. It's close to 60%. There are a lot of reasons. The number one reason is some authors, they didn't check the instruction to authors. They didn't read the aims and scopes of the journal. They submitted hospitality papers. They submitted food service papers. In some cases, they submit a paper that is totally unrelated to tourism and hospitality to the journal. Now, for these kind of cases, automatically, we, as the editor, we forward the paper back to the author. Okay? Now, format is another thing. We stated clearly, we only consider full-length articles with the length anywhere from 5,000 to 7,500 works. But we still receive submissions with about 2,000 works, the research looks, or sometimes people send a file with more than 20,000 works. Now, for these kind of cases, of course, they will be desk rejected. Now, the third thing is getting more serious, is about the content originality. We check all the submissions through the anti-plagiarism software, and approximately a quarter of the submissions didn't pass through. As the young scholar, probably some of them, they didn't know, they did this unintentionally, right? But remember, when you cite other people's work, you have to cite it properly with a double quote. That includes your own work, okay? And don't look at the overall similarity. Look at the individual items clearly and carefully. A long paper with a very low overall similarity can still be problematic if the individual item is not good. Okay? And then other things are contribution, methodology, spelling, readability, all those as what other panel speakers have already talking about.
Thank you so much. So, yes, Dr. Roberts.
I want to add thing, building on what you talked about, Bob, the so what question. And it's certainly something our senior editorial team asks about a paper. You make it through all the basics things you see on the list, but we say, who's going to cite this work? Who's going to use it? So I encourage you to say that to yourself. When you put together this idea you're excited about, you're citing the literature, ask yourself, who's going to use my work? I think that'll help you really understand how to frame it better so that when we get it as a journal or your readers see it eventually, they understand the value of the contribution of what you make. This is a key question to answer.
Thank you so much for your comments. So we have to stick to the basic guidelines, then select the right target journal, and also try to think from the reader's perspective, what kind of benefit that should reader get in terms of justification, not only answering so what question, but what's new. So let's move to next slide, please. So there are a lot of authors work solely versus as a team publishing. There are a lot of great scholars work together as a team, and also there are some scholars wanting to work in the solo. So there are some discussion items that we can put it on the table, that what are the pros and cons of work individually versus as a team. So I will ask Professor McKercher to start the discussion on this item, please.
Thank you. The rules have changed quite dramatically from when we started to publish and we started to do research. It used to be that scholars adopted a craft approach, that you learned under a mentor, you learned slowly over many years how to assume all the roles of conducting research, so that by the time you were ready, you were fully proficient in all aspects of research and could therefore lead a project and publish in high quality outputs. What tends to happen now is the marketization and industrialization of research means that people are working in teams. And there's a real risk that individuals will become specialized in one small component of the research process, but not learn the whole research process. So somebody may be the English editor, or somebody may be the statistical guy, or somebody may be the person who specializes in writing the literature review. Now, there are a number of advantages in working in teams in that you can maybe tackle bigger projects, but the real risk is that as an individual, you may not learn the skills that are required to produce high-quality research on your own. And one of the things that we've noticed, and Vincent Tong and I have done a number of studies on this, the number of authors per paper has doubled in the last 20 years. Right now, the single author paper is on the endangered species list. 3 and 4 authors are typical now. And what tends to happen is you see clumps of people producing a lot of work, but once the lead person who's responsible for getting that work into a top-tier journal moves on, then all of a sudden all the other authors disappear. They either publish in lower-tier journals or stop being able to produce publishable work. And the challenge for everybody is how can you be responsible for developing your own expertise. Now, these are just a couple of comments from other fields of study. And one of them is that within physics research, for example, the increasing division of responsibilities is one of the reasons for the downward trend in creativity, which also means that the downward trend in getting top-tier papers or innovative papers published. That too much collaboration can make papers less innovative as you have to work to the lowest common denominator. And also, academics who focus on derivative studies or who rely on collaborators to undertake specialist roles may not learn how to conduct the type of more innovative, deep research that's acceptable in top-tier journals. We'll talk about this more as well when we look at publishing and the opportunities created by the proliferation of journals, but the real risks too and the proliferation of journals of slicing and dicing research too thinly and of not developing the skills that are required to be able to aim high and accomplish high. And with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you. Professor Lowe?
I certainly agree with what Professor McKercher was saying, but I look at this from another perspective. We need to work independently. That means single author papers. Okay? But at the same time, we need to work with the others. That means joint publications. We need to work as a team in many cases. Now, either way is fine. But in some universities, they only look at first author or single author. Some other universities, they look at single author, first author, and corresponding author. It really depends on where do you come from. And then check with your university what the requirements are in terms of the recognition of journal publications. Now, personally, I tend to give the opportunity to the young scholars. Publishing in a team is fine as long as each person really contributes. But you cannot rely on the same team again, and again. You really have, as a young scholar, you really have to diversify your collaboration network. That means so you can work with different people, as well as you can work independently by writing some endangered species. That's what you said? Yeah.
Okay. Professor Roberts, want to add to that?
Sure. Know that as editors, this is not an issue of importance to us. We care about the quality of the body of work that comes in the front door. So whether it's single or multiple author, don't think that's a concern for us. But certainly, as Professor Law said, think about your institution values. You know, I had a research partner for most of the body of my work. When I was at mini tenure, I got feedback, hey, we want to see a sole author to demonstrate you can do it by yourself. And I did. And that was fine, but I really believe 2 heads are better than 1, and building a partnership with someone I could work over time has really added to the strength of what we could contribute. So consider not just collaborative in teams, but maybe building a relationship with a partner or 2 that you can consecutively publish articles together in a team environment. Build on each other's strength and teach each other as you go forward.
Probably just a brief supplement to what has already been said. For me, actually, most of my publications actually are jointly with my co-authors from other institutions. Later, I think we will discuss the authorship issue related to collaboration. Many universities actually encourage international collaboration, and especially the tourism discipline is a multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary area of study. So naturally, the authorship, the number of authors on a paper will increase. That probably reflected the nature of the subject area. And it is a different issue later we'll discuss. We probably were against the idea of gift authorship. You basically, put someone on the paper who did not have not made any contribution to the study, but that's a different issue. So international collaboration, working on a big project that need large impact need collaboration, but at the same time, individual researchers should demonstrate their leadership, independent skills, and also leadership in their research.
Thank you.
I'd like to add a further comment to this, and the issue isn't the merits of sole-authored versus team-authored paper, because clearly there are some very real benefits of working with teams. The issue is, as a younger academic, are you learning the skills to lead projects? Now, again, the work that Dr. Tung and I did, we looked at prolific authors, people who had published at least 6 papers in the previous 8 or 10 years. Our best guess is that 40% of those people never once appeared as the lead author on any work, and that a substantial proportion of that 40% pretty much rode on the coattails of their collaborators in order to get their work published. What happens when that collaboration ends? If you don't have the ability to publish in top-tier journals, you may kid yourself that you are a good researcher because you're relying on your collaborators. When you change schools, when you get promoted, when you move to somewhere else, all of a sudden the chickens are going to come home to roost, and you'll find that your career is dead-ended. So the issue isn't one of should you collaborate or not. Yes, by all means collaborate, by all means co-author, but there are some times when it's best to play the junior partner in a team, but you also have to learn how to be the senior partner on a team and be the person who is the one who is responsible for getting that paper accepted in JHTR or Annals or Tourism Management or JOST, not the person whose name is associated because you helped out with that paper. It's up to you to develop your own career and to take that control over your career.
Thank you so much. Your points are well taken because each individual has to have a certain competence level to conduct the research, but at the same time, each person has their strength. So as long as they focus on the strengths and then be able to conduct the research as a leader, I mean, that is the bottom line. I mean, you don't want to be a leader in the data collection, but you can be definitely a leader in several different areas, including data collection. That's what I would say from what we heard from this wonderful panelist. So as an extension of this topic, we are moving to topic number 3, please, that there are ethical issues when we work in a team. What kind of a contribution or how we place an order of authorship, and there are several different games we have to play. So I'd like to invite Dr. Song to lead this discussion on the research ethics.
Okay, thank you for the chair. And the research ethics actually is a very important topic in research, especially for younger junior academics and the students. They have to know the research ethics, especially in publication. Commonly, in the research, misconduct include 3 types. That is fabrication of data. I'm sure in our circle this happened very rare. But in other areas, you do see incidents where the researchers actually fabricate the data. And they use the fabricated data to test their hypothesis and reach their stated research objectives. These also include sometimes, for example, students or junior researchers using questionnaire survey because it requires a large number of response, and sometimes they probably give it to their students or others, and other people actually just take the questionnaire. This is also a kind of data fabrication, and this happened rarely, but this happened in research. The second is a falsification. Falsification is that, yes, we have the data collected, but somehow when you analyze the data, you're trying to manipulate the data and only publish the data analysis that actually meet your research objective, ignore the result of your analysis from the large data set. So that's just falsification. The third one is what we call plagiarism. We have already touched upon this issue. So whenever you cite other studies, you should actually use a proper method to cite other studies. And also self-plagiarism is another issue. So if you publish paper elsewhere, when you're actually doing follow-up research, if you don't cite, if you actually use some of the materials in the previous publication, but you didn't cite it, it's called self-plagiarism. These are broadly what we call research misconduct, which is ethical issues related to research, and especially for young academics and students. And these are the things that we should never do, right? This is, we call it FFPs, research misconduct. And some lighter ethical problems which may relate it to things like authorship, which I mentioned earlier, gift authorship. As we all know, if we put our name on a paper, that will represent accountability and credit, right? No matter what happened, you should be accountable for that piece of research that you have done. And also, you are credited because of your research and your contribution to the theory and the practice. Think about it. If you put a person's name on the paper who has not contributed significantly to the research, if this is for promotion purpose or for other evaluation purpose, and this person claims the credit, and then later on you will find actually this person will not be able to carry out independent research and contribute to the scientific research field, and also the institution he or she is work for. And this actually is kind of to a less extent serious than compared with the three misconduct that I mentioned earlier. Some other ethical issues related to publication also include simply duplicate research using a data set. You cut basically the data set into few pieces and analyze the data and write a paper and send it to different journals for publication. This is also an ethical issue, but again, it's not as serious as the three issues I mentioned earlier, but it is unethical in research as far as editors and journal publishers as concerned. Another issue which also relate to ethical issue is that probably in the research, the senior staff tend to negotiate with their collaborators in terms of authorship, right? So sometimes the senior colleagues, using their influence, probably put their name as a first author, while their students or younger researchers as a second or third author, though their contribution are much significant. So these are other ethical issues. These are the few. There may be other ethical issues as well, and these are the things I would like to point out, and we can discuss this issue and all related issues as a panel, and also may open up discussion later.
Great, thank you.
I'd like to draw everybody's attention to the column on the right. Vince and I did a study of academics from around the world, and we looked at new and emerging scholars, mid-career scholars, and senior scholars. And some of the numbers are really quite astounding, that a half of the new and emerging scholars felt it was in their best interest to join research teams, even if their contribution was minimal, just to get their names on papers to meet publishing quotas. That a quarter of, again, new, emerging, and even mid-career scholars felt pressure to gift names of authors, to add the Rob Laws or the Paulines or the Brian Kings or whoever, in the hope that because a senior person's name is on the paper, somehow that will ease it through the refereeing process. And I've actually been a victim of a gift authorship where one of a former student here asked me to read a paper. I said it wasn't very good. Methodologically, it was flawed. The next thing I noticed, I got an email from tourism management saying, you're listed as a co-author on this paper. Please, if there's a problem with you being an author, let me know. And so I had a long talk with that student about the ethics of including my name. And she was quite honest that she was hoping that because my name was associated with the paper, the editor would say, okay, we'll send it to easy reviewers. More than a third felt pressure to add guest authors, to work with either a fellow student or a fellow junior colleague to add their name to the paper in exchange for having their name added to the work that the other authors did. And again, this was all a matter of building up your assumed publications profile. There are a couple of other things too, that a third, and especially junior staff, felt pressure to change the author order, to either move their names down the list or to move their supervisors' names up the list. And 1 out of 5 people we surveyed said that they felt pressure to remove author names. Senior academics are more likely to include research assistants. Younger people are more likely to ask to have names removed so they can get more credit in the paper. And these are just a couple of other comments that people made. I was pressured to include authors who never got involved in this research from an emerging scholar. I was asked to put my supervisor's name above my name in the article, even though I had done all the work. And one person from somewhere in Central Asia said, if I want to publish and ask opinions from some lecturers, after a few comments, she adds her name as the first author. That's just appalling behavior.
For ethics, quite often some scholars, they collect a huge, they have the data and then that forms a huge data set, and then they try to turn this huge data set into multiple papers. But this is fine, as long as all the papers are different, all right? And then as long as you tell the reviewers and the editors clearly all these papers are from that data set, okay? So be honest. There are other occasions which the young scholars always ask. I published this paper in a conference. Can I send it to a journal? What my advice is, wait, okay? Wait until you finish the conference and see whether the proceeding is copyright protected. If the answer is yes, sorry, you cannot, because you already transferred the copyright to the conference organizer. If not, then you can ask the conference organizer, okay, whether you can send a revised version or improved version of your conference paper to a journal. Okay? Now, if the conference organizer is happy with this one, then when you submit your paper to journal, you need to state this clearly, that an earlier version of this paper was presented and published in whatever conference proceeding. So make everything clear. It is up to the editor whether he or she will accept your paper or not. Okay? Don't hide anything. Everything, we can find everything from the internet very easily. Okay? And then follow up on what Professor McKercher was saying, authorship. Again, this just to recap what I said earlier. It is fine to have a team of authors, but make sure everyone contributes significantly. Okay? So again, as a young scholar, don't calculate, right? Don't say, I spend 99% of the work is done by me, so I should be the single author for this paper. So if someone really contributes, right, your supervisor or other senior colleagues, if they have actually contributed to the paper, invite them politely. As Professor Sean said earlier, okay, if they believe they have made a significant contribution, they'll be happy to be included as a co-author to improve the quality of the paper. It's not that they lead your paper, it's that they are willing to help you to improve the quality of the paper, which will have a higher chance to be accepted eventually by a good journal.
Thank you. Professor Roberts, you want to add comments on those items?
I do, thank you. You know, one of the wonderful advances of technology is the information sharing, and part of that is what they've been talking about. Anything that gets out on the web becomes traceable. So when you submit a paper to the journal, sure, it's a peer blind review process at JHTR. Those author names are stripped off the moment you submit them. Nobody in the reviewing process sees those names. So if you want to add a star to the list of names because you think that's going to have influence, just know that the reviewers and the associate editors don't see that. That influence doesn't exist. And if you've submitted it to a conference or some other place, sure, that's a way that we get feedback on our work and we can take and improve our work based on that feedback. But just like you talked about, Dr. Law, there's copyright concerns. But beyond that, also, that gets logged into the wonderful world of internet, the wonderful world of information sharing. And we run, at JHTR, we run every paper that our reviewers have recommended acceptance, we run it through our Authenticate system that Sage, the publisher, has. And it will find that journal, sorry, that conference you presented it at, and it will tell us that this is not original work. When we assign reviewers, we assign reviewers who are experts in your field. They are current in the body of work. Countless times I've had reviewers write back to me and say, the paper you just asked me to look at, it's already out there, or portions of this have been already published. They know the field like you do. So they're going to spot it, or we'll electronically find it. So yes, have your integrity. Be honest. Be candid about what you're doing. Certainly present it to others and learn and grow, but recognize it really has to be original work, and we will find it if it's not.
Just another supplement. And also we see sometimes younger academics submit the same piece of research to multiple journals. Probably under pressure for publication, they want to get the quick result, and they submit the same paper to multiple journals. And because the editors and reviewers are the researcher in the field, they will talk to each other, and this will be found out. So you should never do this in article submission. Another issue is that I know researchers published their research in one language, for example, in a region where the publication is not English, and then somehow translated the same articles and published and submit to English journals. And this can be found out as well. So these are the things that we have already witnessed as editors in the past.
Just a couple of other comments. One is, it's always best to get one good paper from a piece of work. than have 3 lousy papers or 3 rejected papers. And one of the oddest things that happened to me was within about 10 days of each other, I received 3 papers submitted to 3 different journals to review, and 2 of the tables in each paper were exactly the same. Now, it made for a really easy review because it was a very short review sent to all 3 journal editors. If this person combined the 3 papers, there would be 1 good paper, but right now none of the 3 is publishable. Reject. The other piece of advice too is if a paper gets rejected, don't shop it around to other journals without making revisions. The referees make comments on the paper. Even if they don't like the paper, the comments are designed to help improve the paper. And again, there have been occasions when the same paper has come to me as a person has shopped it down through different journals.
Because you review for different journals.
I reviewed for different journals. It was exactly the same paper with no revisions at all. And again, by the time it got to the 3rd journal, I just said, this is the 3rd time I've seen this paper. Here is the first review, reject. Now, that guy was, I'm assuming it's a guy, okay? I'm using a non-sexist term. I'm using a non-sexist term of guy. It could be male or female. But that guy's stupid and really irresponsible. If you're that lazy that you won't even address the comments made by referees who know something about the paper, then you don't deserve to get it published.
Shall we move to the last item?
Please.
Yes. I was here earlier in today's plenary session too when Professor Ki-Joon mentioned about his enjoyment doing research, because I enjoyed it, doing research. So the things that what we hear is a lot of people are so much pressure to publish, to go to the next level. But we really need to enjoy being innovative researcher, working in this wonderful world. The world is getting more smaller and more transparent. So I'd like to ask our panelists to share their wisdom on how we can further develop our research career. And the final slide that we are showing you here is actually created by Professor Rob Lowe, and he'll talk about publication versus research. But I'd like to ask each panelist to talk about sort of your last advice, thoughts, comments on how we can further develop our researcher as a career. Professor Lowe?
Thank you, Ki-Joon. I don't know why. I have most, if not all, of the young academics. Okay, they have the feeling that publication is everything. Okay, but even publication has different meanings. Long time ago, publication means publish anything that is refereed, and at a later time means publication in a refereed journal, and the later time means publication in the top journal. Now is publication techniques and impact. But now if you look at this chart, that's what they use in the TXE Times higher education ranking for the university in the world. If you look at this one clearly, research is for 30%, citation is for 30%, teaching is 30%, and then 10% for others. Now, if you look at research only, publication is only one of the 3 components. All right? So even though you did excellent in terms of research output or research productivity, the overall research performance, okay, is not perfect. Don't forget, we still have the research income. That means research grant. And then on this stage, citations is as important as publications. Citation means whether people read your work and cite your work. Like I keep saying this, I've said this for many times. If nobody reads and cites your work, you're talking to yourself. Okay? And then some top American research institutes, now they require their professors. If you want to become become a full professor in some top American research institutes, faculty of engineering or science, basically you need to have the H index of 18 or 19, okay, for the SCI and SCI system, okay? So research, okay, is important. Citation is also important. And then what is also important, don't forget, we are teaching international outlook and industry income. So if you want to become a successful scholar or academics in a good university, you have to do well in all these criteria. Okay, that's my suggestion.
Yes, Dr. Roberts.
I encourage you to develop one or two streams of research where you become an expert in that area. For me, who had been 18 years in industry before I made the change to higher education, I was new to teaching. I was new to higher ed. So certainly my field of strategic management was my interest in my research, and I developed a stream around strategy. But also for me, hospitality education was a logical stream. I wanted to learn more about what this field of ours was about, but also as an outsider coming into it, I saw opportunities to improve it. So I ended up conducting a stream of research around hospitality education, which also helped me advance as a teacher, as an educator, but it also made contributions to our field. And I stuck to my primary interest, strategy. So by developing those two streams, I was able to articulate it in the review process. I watched my body of work have an impact in the field in both streams as people used my work. So by concentrating, by focusing on an area that I cared about, that I had interest in, that I had the skills and ability to do work in, I created successful pathways. I wasn't all over the place. I was stuck to what I knew how to do.
Okay, my view on this is that you should love doing research. You should have a passion doing research. If you do not have a passion in research, and then perhaps academics is wrong profession for you. If you are working to stretch yourself to, in order to meet all these criteria and deadlines in your life, you will feel very, very stressful, right? Being academics can be very stressful. I think as an academic and as a successful academic, you have to have a passion and love research. And also another point I would like to make is the knowledge transfer. So whatever we do in research, although the starting point is higher level, rigorous academic research, but this research should be applicable, relevant to the policy makings and decision makings in the industry and practice, and we should find the way to transfer our knowledge to practice.
Great, thank you.
I have two pieces of advice. The first piece of advice is the only asset that we have is our professional reputation. And if you destroy your professional reputation, you've destroyed your career. So manage your professional reputation. That means if you're going to a conference to present, make sure you present well. If you're going to post something on TriNet, make sure you know what you're talking about when you post on TriNet. Try not to publish in predatory journals. The second piece of advice I want to give everybody is don't
Sorry,
work.
Bob, will you tell them what a predatory journal is? Some may not know.
The predatory journals are the pure pay-to-publish journals where oftentimes as much as $1,000 US. You submit a paper and they will publish it. Now, there's many open access journals that are legitimate journals that charge a fee, that's fine, but the pure predatory journals, and there used to be a wonderful Beals website, but unfortunately it got shut down, that listed predatory journals. And there are about 12 in our field that are predatory. If you go onto the International Academy's website, there's a list of those journals. The second piece of advice is don't work weekends and make sure you take all your annual leave entitlement. Because if you work all the time, you don't realize how burnt out you are. And usually by the end of the semester, you are incapable, or by the end of the school year, you're incapable of writing publishable work because your brain is full. Take a holiday, come back, and have fun.
So at the end of the day, we have to be happy. So I think we are all happy now that we discussed all those things that we wanted to discuss, but we'll be even happier if you get some good questions, not good questions, questions from you that we'll try to respond to you our best. So now let's turn into a Q&A session for the remaining time. Any questions for the panelists? Yes, there's a question.
I can talk to my lecture voice. So as a person who moved to tourism district line from the other area, I was at first shocked with the reviewing time. If we look at the best examples, like PLOS One currently offers 1 month from the date you sent the paper and until the date the reviewing process has ended. So I kind of have two side questions. Number one is, what do you think about improving the reviewing time? And number two, as a reviewer, I found out that the journals are now experimenting with paid for review scheme, like when you are finishing your review in 1 month, you are getting an equivalent of a dinner for two. And if you are finishing your review in 2 weeks, it's fine dinner for two, something like that. So what do you think about getting, I would say, more contemporary in, yeah.
Could I go? You know, the length of the review process is dependent more so on you, the authors, than it is the reviewers. Yes, when you submit it, there's a time period where the desk review unfolds, and then we send it out to to reviewers, and we typically give them 4 weeks. So sure, there's about a month involved in that. But keep in mind, this is a voluntary role. Those reviewers have volunteered to do this without compensation. So how much can I push them as an editor? I can gently push and prod. And most of them are good-spirited because they know when they submit their papers, they want reasonable timeframes on their reviews too. So the whole thing works on this volunteer basis. It's really tough to yell at too many people and get them to push back, get the reviews back in. But often when that review process does work, and most of the time it does, we track the number of average days across our reviews, and as editors we attempt to manage that. That goes back, and if it isn't rejection, it's inviting a revision. This is where the authors take over. Sometimes it's 6 months, 9 months before I see that revision come back in. Now, if it comes back in 2 days, we don't like that either, because that means you weren't very thoughtful about it. But we expect you to take a little time to be thoughtful, to integrate the reviews, to reflect, and send something back in. But that could easily add another 3 to 4 weeks on it. And we'll send it out to the same set of reviewers. So it's built with time to reflect intentionally. True, I agree, once it's accepted, from that point when it gets out into the publication mode is something we have to carefully watch. The good news is most of the publishers now are within weeks of acceptance, they're uploading it into the library databases, into the system, so when somebody is searching, they're going to find it. So even though my journal might not publish it in print for a year after it was accepted, the knowledge is already out there, people are accessing it and using it, so the print version is really kind of a late to party kind of thing, but not that important because the knowledge is already out there. So most of our time management isn't really on the reviewer side, it's often on the author side as they respond in revisions and send it back in. And on the pay-to-play, so far my organization is saying we want nothing to do with that. That's not the spirit of what our world is about. We're not going to participate in that.
Just a follow-up on that, on the first question. Yes, it is a volunteer type of work for academics. Therefore, if you think we have more than 300 journals, right? Every journals on average probably will have 4 to 5 submissions to the journals. Now every paper we need at least two reviewers, sometimes 3 reviewers. So you can count how many reviewers are needed annually to review all these papers submitted. So therefore, the length of the review can getting a bit longer because of this pressure and also the limited reviewers. So at this juncture, therefore, as editor for Journal China Tourism Research and also a social editor of Annual Tourism Research and also a Tourism Tribune in China, I will call for young academics when they become tenured and become mature in research, volunteer yourself to be a reviewers to these journals, and the editors will welcome your contribution as a reviewers. I sometimes send the manuscript to academics whom I now may have done some research in a particular area, and then I send paper to young reviewers, but then I very often receive a reply of reject the invitation. And sometimes this is understandable if you are not in the area of research. I send the paper to you, you are not expert in review the articles. But if you have done research in this area and you publish in this area and your paper published because other reviewers contribute to review your paper, and then you should actually help others, especially younger academics, to publish their work. Volunteer your time and effort to review articles so that we all benefit from this process. So I take this opportunity to call upon younger academics to volunteer yourself to be the reviewers for journals.
And if I could, we welcome that, and tell us your new edit. We've got ways to train you on it. I'll often make you a fourth reviewer just so that you can write a review and get experience at it, and when the other 3 professional reviews come in, I'll share them with you so you can compare and contrast what you did with others. So we'll spend effort to help you become a good reviewer if you don't have experience. Just step forward, we'll help work it out.
Okay. Do other panelists want to respond?
As editors, you probably don't know how stressful we are to find suitable reviewers. I edit different journals, and quite often I need to find as many as 10 reviewers, and hopefully 3 of them will say yes to my invitation. Okay, it's uneasy, but as an author, I guess young scholars, they have to be realistic. There was once I received a submission on April the 1st, and this person sent me an email asking me. 1 week later, this person sent me an email asking me whether his paper can be published in the same month. I said, of course cannot. You have to go through the system. So, Professor Song is correct. For young scholars, please, okay, accept the invitations. Otherwise, the reviewers go to the same reviewers. The same reviewers who are willing to do the review. I understand in some universities, in certain countries, as an author of some essay-listed journals, you get financial incentives. But as a reviewer, you don't get anything. Right? So some people are saying yes already. Okay, but serving the academic community is part of our job, put it this way. Okay? It's going to help us, okay, to know what other people are doing. You can put this into your CV as well. So again, my advice is always take advantage or take the privilege of being a reviewer for academic journals. Thank you.
I'd like to invite audience to ask a second question, please.
We were that clear? Jeez.
So what are the issues that you encounter when you're trying to get work published? We have editors or co-editors of a bunch of journals here, and we may be able to help answer some questions.
Again, going back to the timing of the review process, we can see through different conferences that probably entirely a new stream of research kind of like emerging in the tourism area, like application of big data, sentiment analysis, researchers start handling large data sets. And this type of data analysis, which require very high technical proficiency, hasn't been published like too much previously in tourism journals. So my first question is whether you kind of like feel the lack of reviewers in that area who would like to kind of like donate the time into this highly kind of like technical area. And maybe if not, that's why the timing of reviews are long. And another question is that some reviewers kind of like respond to such papers from probably a kind of like, I wouldn't say old mentality, but more traditional mentality from like they like hypothesis-driven research rather than data-driven research, or they kind of like asking about theoretical framework for the totally new area of the research. So as editors, how do you handle those kind of like disagreements maybe or different viewpoints on the part of researchers who are coming in the tourism area from different disciplines and the traditional mentality of tourism publishing?
Okay, three really good questions there. The first one is if you look at most journals, the publication decision is made within 3 months. And it's extended longer if the person is slow in making the reviews, or if, as Professor Law said, you know, you've invited 8 people, 7 have said no, so you've got to keep finding more and more reviewers. The issue about non-traditional publications it is an emerging issue, but now again with the journals, with the various publishers, we can access reviewers from outside of tourism who can look at these non-traditional fields and who can give comments on it. Your third point is a really interesting point, and unfortunately I'm a minority in that, A, I don't believe in most hypothesis testing because that narrows the research. Most theoretical frameworks aren't theoretical at all, they're research frameworks. And for much of our research, the best research is research that explores ideas. And it's frustrating when you talk to especially younger scholars and you say, well, what's your project about? And they say, well, I haven't decided, but I'm going to use SEM. Or I'm going to use a specific method. And really good research is all about asking and answering a question. And hopefully the editors of the good journals will see where a question is asked and answered. And if the reviewers say there's no theoretical framework, well, hopefully a good editor will say, maybe it's because there isn't any theory driving this, but it still is a really interesting question. So you've hit on a really important question. And again, what I've found is that there are some journals that are more open to exploring ideas. And there's some other journals and some other editors of journals that want work. And it's just a matter of trial and error to find out which journals are more open to more ideas than others.
Right. I think probably from this point onward, we will have different discussions. I'm different from Bob, and I'm a quantitative person trained as an economist. I believe theoretical framework, models, and hypothesis testing. So probably I'm a traditional guy in the area. But in terms of the emerging research topics like big data analytics, I think there are more and more people doing research in this area. And we already seen a number of academics actually engage in this direction. I think we can find reviewers within our field in tourism, and also, as Bob already indicated, we can access to expert in other areas, computing and so on. So that's an emerging area. I see more and more paper being published. But at the end of the day, my view is that those big data analytics will be able to identify the patterns which help business or practice in their decision making, but we have to ask the why question and how question. And these why and how questions are hypothesis-driven, model-driven, and theory-driven. So I think eventually it will have to converge to the traditional research method. I might be wrong. I may become minority in the future, but I think at this stage, even for the big data analysis, instead of only identify the patterns, the trend, we need to find out stories behind those patterns and trend.
Could I offer an answer that isn't question and hasn't been asked? We encourage qualitative research in addition to quantitative research. I think there's so much richness in qualitative research that can be added. Our journals have been limiting in their ability to express that, though. We've been black and white print, so the ability to have color photos has never been there, to have videos, to have transcripts of interviews, and we can provide those kinds of rich sources now in our publications. Sure, the print version is still going to be limited, but the major publishers, certainly Sage I work with, it has over 1,000 journals, offers the ability for online storage of these extra facilities. So if you want color, if you want live videos that you've recorded, etc., we welcome them now as part of that qualitative research data set, and we have ways to communicate it to readers. So we encourage you to do more of that work and submit it to us. Please.
But to me, a good paper is a good paper. Whether it is a qualitative or quantitative paper doesn't really matter. SEM, since somebody mentioned, I don't know why. On these days, if we don't use SEM, it doesn't look like this is a good paper. To me, SEM stands for Search Engine Marketing. All right? My background is IT, okay? So, IT stands for?
International tourism.
But remember, you are writing a paper, you're telling a story. Now, the way you're telling a story is whether you can convince the reviewers and the editors that you're telling a story from the beginning to the end without any kind of major faults or major problems or limitations. We can accept some minor mistakes, a little bit of grammatical mistakes, for example, all right? This is fine. But if you're telling the story in the wrong way, okay, in that case, I guess low reviewers or low editors will be positive. Now, after all, we will listen to, in most cases, we'll listen to the reviewers' comment, and they'll read the papers ourselves, and they will make a decision, all right? The decision can be positive, and sometimes it can be negative, if you cannot tell a story in a good way. Okay? So after all, the conclusion is a storytelling, okay, stage.
Okay, thank you so much. Any other questions from the audience?
Try to avoid stupid mistakes.
How would I know I'm making one?
Well, I just had a paper that I'm a co-author on rejected today. And one of the reasons why it was rejected is, for some reason, we gave an average gender. So.
Oh, interesting.
So the gender score was 1.3. Okay. Instead of saying 70% female, 30% male, we gave an average score of gender. Now, that's a stupid mistake.
Yeah.
And I have to accept full responsibility for making that stupid mistake. And on the basis of that mistake, the paper should be rejected. And also stupid mistakes like length of stay. I've seen length of stays down to 3 significant decimal places. And when you work it out, that means you're counting the length of stay down to seconds. When you ask people what their length of stay was, they say 1 night, 2 nights, whatever. So you can't do a length of stay down to 1 night, 6 hours, 5 minutes, and 8 seconds. So ignore, just try to avoid dumb mistakes like that. And you know, one of the challenges now is that journals are receiving so many manuscripts that they've shifted from looking for reasons to help people publish to sometimes looking for reasons not to publish. And so if you commit stupid mistakes, then you've given the editor a justifiable reason to say no.
And I'm going to do a shameless plug for JHTR. And many of you might know we've had a backlog. It's taken a couple of years, to your point, for some of our publications to hit the print version. But the good news is our publisher has been paying attention to the impact factor, to how many people are downloading the articles, how many people are citing the works. They're pleased, and so in the last 2 years, they have doubled the number of editions we put out in the year, and they virtually doubled our page budget. So last year we had a 3% acceptance rate, 97% were rejected. But the good news is, with them doubling our capacity, we're going to be pushing that acceptance rate closer to 9 or 10%. We're going to be able to publish more research. So I encourage you to consider JHTR. We've got greater capacity to put out more work. Faster. We're down to a 10-month delay now from acceptance to publication.
One piece of advice that I always give young academics is ignore the rejection rate. Instead, focus on the number of papers that are published. So the top journals may have a 3 or 5% acceptance rate, but they'll publish 100 papers a year. Now, the fact that 97% of what's submitted gets rejected can be quite disheartening. But you only have to be one of 100 papers that are good enough to get published. And if you look around the room, everyone in this room is capable of writing that one paper that is good enough to get published. So focus on this success rate and the number of papers that are published rather than the rejection rate, especially given that 50 to 70% of papers are desk rejected because they have no chance of succeeding. So why not focus on the fact that tourism management publishes 200 papers a year? So you just have to be one. It doesn't matter if you're the 199th best paper. You're still publishable in tourism management.
And also some researchers, when they submit papers, they quite get often rejected or resubmit, and we all gone through this same process. And I think we should have a good strategy to deal with those reviewers' feedback. Right? If you get a chance, if your paper is rejected, but you are allowed to resubmit, and this is actually a very good result, especially for the top journals. So don't actually lose this opportunity to seriously look at those comments and address the reviewers' comment, one by one, and try to improve your paper based on their comments. Don't take those comments very personally. I'm sure some of you receive the reviewers' comments back, and it's very nasty and sometimes can be hurting as well. And this, we actually received the same sort of rejection letters as well. But don't take it personally, and look at those comments and revise your paper based on those comments, and resubmit to the journal if you are given a chance.
Yeah, good point. I would like to say also, I guess though editors, we want to reject papers, okay? But if for all kinds of reasons, limitations, constraints, we need to maintain the low acceptance rate. Now, as an author, if your paper is unluckily rejected, and if you can respond in a civilized way, that would be very professional. Okay? There was once when I was young, my paper was turned down by a mainstream journal. I sent an editor an email, okay, telling the editor that I would like to thank although my paper was not accepted, I would like to thank the reviewers for their constructive comments. And I received very positive reply from the editor. Okay, so be positive. That's the message I want to say. All right.
All right, I'd like to make conclusion remarks. First, I'd like to thank all the panelists on this wonderful event that we shared our views to our audience. And I mean, the bottom line is we need to really enjoy what we are doing. We choose this career as a researcher or scholar that we have to have a sustained motivation and the passion to do our job in a happy mode. And sometimes we have an unhappy, bad news here from the editor that, oh, your paper was rejected. But as Professor Song and all other colleagues mentioned, that don't get personal, but get encouraged to get the best constructive, to use the constructive comments to do it better. And from the reviewers or editors' perspective, when you provide that kind of information, please provide the thoughtful comments to the authors rather than, this paper is not good. Just provide a good comment so that the followers, other junior faculty members can do a better job in the future. So I really appreciate our discussion today, and thanks for your patience in this wonderful event, and I hope to enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Please remain on stage. As a token of our appreciation for the speaker's valuable contribution, may I now invite Dr. Ki-Joon to kindly present the certificates to the speakers. Dr. Joon, please. First, I would like to invite Professor Rob Law to receive the appreciation. Professor Law, please. Please remain on stage. Next, we would like to invite Professor Bob McKercher to receive the appreciation. Professor McKercher, please. Thank you, and please remain on stage. Next, we would like to invite Professor Haiyan Song to receive the appreciation. Professor Song, please. Thank you, and please remain on stage. Now, we would like to invite Professor Chris Roberts to receive the appreciation. Professor Roberts, please. Thank you very much, and please remain on stage. As a token of our appreciation for the section chair's valuable contribution, may I invite Dr. Jung to kindly present the certificates to the section chair. Thank you, Professor Beck. Please take a group photo together. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Zheng, the Associate Dean of SHTM. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your active participation today. Before the end of this section, we have some warm reminders for all of you. The optional hotel icon tour will start shortly. The assembly point is at Sky Bridge. For delegates who will join the dinner with speakers, the section will be held at 7 o'clock in Bistro 9079. Signage will be placed at each floor. You can take the elevator to B1 to reach Bistro 9079. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.